in the making. The legendary 1971 World Sportscar Championship season has been brought to life in Grand Prix Legends. And this is one time where legendary really is the appropriate term. The 1971 championship was the end of an era, the final year in which 5-liter engine sports cars would compete head-to-head with the lighter and more nimble 3-liter prototypes. It would be the last year of a true production special at the top level of sports car racing for some 25 years. It was a season dominated by the likes of Porsche and the iconic 917, but chased closely by the Scarlet Italians in their Ferraris and Alfa Romeos. With an eclectic calendar of iconic events any sports car lover would dream about, it was the best drivers with the best cars in the best races. The spirit of the early days of sports car racing had not yet been lost. It's a season which has seen recreation by fan effort in numerous sims over the years, and even a dedicated commercial add-on which tried its best to sell our vintage racing enthusiasm to the masses. 1971 is never far from any historic racing wish list, and I think you can partly thank a certain iconic film for that. So although there are other ways out there, with Grand Prix Legends, the old dog, despite being a bit more basic and limiting the newer sims, thanks to the passionate group of dedicated modders, it serves as a fitting platform as ever to immerse oneself in what made 1971 so special. With a consistency and quality and presentation that is nostalgic in more ways than one. Simply taking a few laps with these famous machines on these great courses will no doubt bring a smile to anyone who's ever dreamed of blasting at 200 miles per hour down the Mulsanne Straight. The wizards of Grand Prix Legends have done it again. Let's take a closer look. And what a better place to begin than at Daytona. Wasn't actually the first round in 1971. The honors there went to Buenos Aires, but second on the season was the Daytona 24-hour, and I'm driving the Penske Ferrari 512. A great car in its own right, and a really interesting story. The car really should have won the race. So we have a slow Porsche on the low side there, following one of the John Wyer 917s into the banking here for turn 3. And 4 of the NASCAR track. This Ferrari, the Penske Ferrari specifically, was really one of the only cars that could keep up with those 917s all throughout the season. They were both part of that Group 5 5-liter sports car class, which was a bit of a loophole in itself. At 1968, I believe it was, the FIA wanted to do away with some of the larger engined prototypes that were running. The Ford GT40, of course, most notably, and the Ferrari 312. The Ford was running something like a 6-liter engine and was reaching insane top speed, so they thought to lower the prototype engine spec to 3 liters. That would put it in line with the Formula One engines of the time for the 1966 rule set, and I think they hoped some Formula One teams would come over and do some sports car racing with the same engine, and that did happen a little bit, but Porsche, who we'll talk about much more later, found a bit of a loophole where they could enter the sports car category with a 5-liter engine and have a much more powerful car, and therefore a much better shot at winning overall at some of these big races, namely Le Mans. And so Ferrari for 1970, I believe, sought to join them, and I believe had to produce 25 road-going variants of this 512 to then have it be eligible for racing in the 5-liter category. And 71 was the last year where that was possible, and they gave it a good shot. Interestingly enough, Ferrari only did private entries for this top class, or I guess highest powered class, and Penske was by far the best of those entries, and it happened almost on accident. Penske was along a Lola shop with the T70, and then on to other Lola makes, and I believe pre-season had their Lola and trailer stolen. And I don't believe it was ever found who stole it, which is interesting. Those kind of cars don't just disappear typically, but in that moment of desperation, they were approached to run a Ferrari 512 for the season. I think this was originally a Can-Am kind of variant of the car, a little bit lighter, a little bit more power, made something like 600 horsepower. It was David Hobbs and Mark Donohue driving during the 4 races of the season, Daytona, the first of those, and in the middle of the night, they had some sort of run-in and caused a bunch of bodywork damage, which took them out of the race itself for the overall win, but they still continued on, and you can find photographs of this car covered in duct tape. It's almost comical how much duct tape they were able to put in this car, just silver strips of tape everywhere, a speed tape, I guess you'd call it, to patch it up and get it to the finish, and I think they ended up still finishing 3rd place or something like that, but lost out to the Porsches, of course. It was that kind of comical bad luck that followed Team Penske around for their other races. I think having incidents with other cars at Sebring, at Le Mans, having some issues, and then ultimately Watkins Glen, I believe the last race of the season, out in the lead. Quite a clear, superior car, breaking some suspension or ball joint, and ending up relegating them to a pretty poor finish for old Mark Donohue and David Hobbs. This car, surprisingly enough, actually did compete as well in Can-Am, at least at Watkins Glen in 1971, so the next day they got another try at it at the same course. Shows the diversity and all the varied kind of racing that you would have seen in 1971, as we got a nice pack of cars here over the line. We'll give it a little chance to breathe here into turn 1 as we come up behind Mark Donohue and David Hobbs himself. This is just one of the 11 different cars included in this mod, and I think they look beautiful. The visual modding of these cars is spot on, and for a sim that was made to do 1967 Grand Prix racing, released back in 1998, it's truly impressive what the modders are able to eke out. This mod focuses in on those top 2 classes that competed side by side in 1971, something that we really don't see today, depending on the circuit, depending on how the race played out. It could have been one of the 5-liter sports cars built off of the road cars with their 25 road variants having been produced. Or, as often was the case, it could be the smaller 3-liter prototypes that really were the future for the sport, but suited much more the twisty circuits, where the lighter, more nimble cars with the shorter wheelbases were really able to shine and come out on top. The mod has a custom painted grid of cars for each of the 11 official rounds from the 1971 season, and even a few of the non-official rounds as well. So depending on the race, you may get to rub elbows with Mark Donohue or David Hobbs, or try to catch up to the Wyer Porsche of Pedro Rodriguez, or even aspire to keep up with the legends themselves, Vic Elford and Nino Vaccarella, at the greatest circuit of them all. And this, to me, is one of the main things I was looking forward to in trying this mod, the Alfa T33 around the Targa Florio. I've been looking at paintings of this car for years and photographs of Vic Elford and Nino Vaccarella and others sliding this car, and the Porsche 908 and the little Ferrari 3-liter as well around the Targa Florio. This was the height of this epic race. The 72-kilometer circuit only ran until 1973. In the final year, although these cars were a part of that race, it ended up being won by a Porsche 911 actually, due to mechanical issues. But for 71 especially, and 72, these were the cars that were the fastest ever around this circuit, and I've always wanted to drive this car in a sim, and there's a few of them out there, but this 1971 version of the T33s will get it all crossed up there. this is the most iconic one to me, seeing those shots of Nino Vaccarella coming through the different towns around this glorious course. This is one of the main things that drew me into really enjoying this event, and to be able to recreate a little bit of that, or just feel maybe what it was like just a little bit, is just so cool. The Alfa T33 was a pretty interesting car because I believe it began its life in 1967 and evolved quite a lot over the years. By the time we get to 1971, it's a completely different looking car, and you wouldn't even say that it necessarily is aero because this car has very little in the way of bodywork on it, but it's a much shorter wheelbase style of the car, the T33. But this car was very competitive in 1971, and it won 3 of the 11 races outright. Ones that you might be surprised, it of course won the Targa Florio with Nino Vaccarella, but it also won at Brands Hatch and Watkins Glen, surprisingly enough, due to some of the attrition like the Ferrari Penske. Now, there surprisingly isn't a lot of footage easily available for the 1971 season, or documentaries and things, but there is an amazing 1972 documentary called Speed Merchants, I believe, that follows Mario Andretti and Jackie Ickx and Vic Elford around for the Ferrari team in 1972. And when they come to the Targa Florio, Vic Elford does some awesome narration over a video of a partial lap, I believe driving this car, and it's just one of those things that's always stuck with me. It's one of the earliest bits of footage I saw that really got me interested in the Targa Florio, and these cars specifically, these little 3-liter prototypes with a short wheelbase. They're just such cool machines, and paired with an epic circuit like this, it is absolutely my dream, and I'm having a lot of fun, if you can't tell. You'll see I'm quite far into the lap now as we run down the hill here and approach the village of Colesano, but it's so much fun driving these cars. I couldn't bring myself to stop with this car on this track, as here is Colesano, the famous town at the top of the mountain with the hairpin that everybody knows and loves. I could do this all day, and I think I will finish this lap entirely. I have no idea how I'll edit this and fit it into a short review, but that's for future me to figure out, because right now present me is just having a lot of fun. Like all Grand Prix Legends mods, when you jump in to the Sportscar 1971 mod, it serves as a total conversion of Grand Prix Legends and brings you into a version of the game that is all about 1971 sports cars. If you jump into team info, you'll get the team info of each of the different teams and the drivers that raced during that season for most of the races in that car. We've got the Ferrari team with Jackie Ickx and Mario Andretti, the one I was talking about, featured in Speed Merchants 1972. And you get into the Porsche teams with the 917K, Vic Elford, Pedro Rodriguez, winning the championship in the John Wyer Porsche. It's these kind of details that I absolutely love about this, and even though it might seem simplistic, the things that are added, having a complete package of these bits of information and context about what you're racing really adds to the whole experience. When you as the player go and choose your player car, some of them feature alternate graphics. So if we look at something like the 312 Porsche, you can choose between the Sebring version itself or just the normal 312P. The 312 from Sebring, I think, featuring slightly different aero, more simplified on the rear than the 312P normally has with its vertical fins. Or even with the Porsche picking between the K1 or the K2, these don't offer different physics necessarily, but do offer the ability to drive the slightly different variants of the car. But each separate car itself does have completely different physics, and they are sports car physics. If you haven't driven in Grand Prix Legends before, these aren't 1967 Formula One cars with sports car skins. They actually do have proper physics that feel much, much different than the normal sports cars do themselves. And of course, when you do look at the races, you do have the full calendar of endurance races from the season. Oddly enough, the Sportscar Championship in 1971 ran from January through July. It was actually pretty early in the season, in the year, really. But it started in Buenos Aires and went on to Daytona. And each of the rounds themselves have the poster from the race that was on the program, most likely. And if you click into each of those, you'll get a little track map and some facts about the circuit. It's all of these little touches. I absolutely love this kind of thing. I don't know if I'm an aging demographic that remembers games that were really catered to a specific thing, but Grand Prix Legends still does that for me. It still gives me a complete experience of something where it doesn't feel like a mod slapped into a generic racing game. It's really a 1971 sports car game with all of the circuits and the cars. Oh, and it doesn't get much more iconic than this. Blasting down the Mulsanne Straight in a Porsche 917, especially a John Wyer Porsche 917. This was the car for 1971. It was the car for 1970 as well. The 917 earned a little bit of a reputation as the ulcer of sports car racing because it was the car that won everything. But it wasn't always that way, and it was through that loophole that this car really became the competitive car that it was. Porsche saw an opportunity to create this sports car category. The 5-liter categories would come through the kink there. Entered the 5-liter category by creating 25 road-going variants of the car, and with the increased power of the engine, saw an opportunity to be able to compete. But it wasn't all a fairy tale ending from there. It took a couple of years from 1968 into 1969 until this car became competitive, and it was 1970 that it finally won after John Wyer was, I think, hired to improve the car and worked out some of the aero issues, especially in the rear of the car that it had, and led us to what I think is an incredibly beautiful car, especially in the Gulf livery. It's a shame it might be a bit overdone these days or something that folks see a little bit too much of, but it really is an iconic livery and car combo. And I don't know, outside of the Holman & Moody Ford GT40s is what I think of when I think of vintage Le Mans. And this is a vintage Le Mans. The eagle-eyed among you will recognize that this isn't quite a 1971 version. It's a little more like the 67 variant, but it features a new addition up here. If we come into Maison Blanche, we actually have to give it a bit more brakes on this version. It's quite tight. A terrifying corner. Feel like Michael Delaney staring off into the distance there. But now coming up to the Ford chicane, which was added in 1968, and to my knowledge, this is the first version of this circuit in Grand Prix Legends to feature this chicane. It was something that was added as a special version specifically for this mod, but for sports car racing mods for this game in general, and is available to download alongside this car pack, and it suits it excellently. That chicane added in 1968 to slow the cars down as they blast through the pit straight there, somewhat long after the big Le Mans crash in 1955, but definitely in response to that somewhat. There were quite a few different versions of this car, and a couple developed specifically for Le Mans itself. I suppose they all were for Le Mans in a way, but a couple special editions that could reach up to 240 miles an hour down the Mulsanne Straight, which, if you know what these cars are constructed out of, it's a tiny bit of fiberglass body and then just a small steel tubing frame. If you look up a picture of the chassis itself, the driver essentially sits right on the front of it, and it would be a terrifying car to go 240 miles an hour in. But for all of the different versions, I think this one in the John Wyer Gulf livery is probably the most iconic, and that has to be because of Steve McQueen's Le Mans movie. But that movie, although it came out in 1971, it was filmed in 1970, so it features the 1970 race, but the Porsche 917 was so dominant in those years and won that 70 race, the first one with the Salzburg team, that it just fits, and it's something that is stuck, I think, in racing ethos for all time. Like I said, as iconic, I think, as the GT40s, the Porsche 917 is historic Le Mans, and it's amazing to be able to relive it, even just a little bit, in this sim. And that's just a really small slice of what's on offer with the 1971 World Sportscar mod for Grand Prix Legends. It's a fantastic year of sports car racing, and to be able to relive it in a package such as this, something that attempts to recreate the whole championship, even a slice of it with two of the top classes, it's been a joy to read about, learn about, drive on some of the tracks, drive the different cars, and experience what that 1971 season was like. This is something that has been in the works for many years. Like I said, right at the beginning of this video, it's been 15 years at least that this mod has been worked on, and it's something that vintage racing enthusiasts have wanted in sim racing for so long. So I'm so happy that the dedicated group that makes mods for Grand Prix Legends have stuck it out for so many years working on this, trying to perfect it within the limitations of this nearly 30-year-old game at this point, and put something together that I think is truly impressive and a heck of a lot of fun. And so I hope you enjoyed this quick overview of what the 1971 mod is. I very much would not expect this to be the last time that you'll find myself in here. The Targa Florio is calling, and I can't wait until there's an online race with the 3-liter cars around that majestic course. But until then, thank you to the Grand Prix Legends modding team for releasing this wonderful creation. And thank you all for watching. This is GP Laps, and I'll see you all again next time.